Hey everyone. Before listening to this week's episode, please note that we'll be discussing some uncomfortable subjects, such as workplace abuse, poverty, and mental health issues.
You're listening to The Disabled Employee, a lived experience podcast where young disabled people talk about their experience with the workforce. Hi everyone, welcome back. My name's Britt and I'm from CYDA's Youth Council. I'll be hosting today's episode. For this one, we're going to be talking about transitioning out of a job that is ending or that you feel that you have to leave, and what that looks like, what the emotional repercussions are, especially for those of us with disabilities, and how we as your host deal with or have dealt with that personally. We'll be also talk about how some of us can't maintain the workforce, even after trying our best, what our struggles have been, and what we can do about these situations. This is really fitting for us at the moment, as we're currently experiencing moving on from CYDA Youth Council. So, for question 1, Tan and Dureece, what are some of our own personal experiences in this?
For me personally, I haven't had a lot of experiences outside of CYDA, but the experiences that I have had with moving on from a job um have been less to do with quitting a job and more with the fact that as a person with a disability, a lot of the jobs that I've been offered or have taken me on board have been contracts. And because of that, there's always been an end date, which isn't really that enjoyable, I will have to say. So a lot of the jobs that I've left are because my contract has run out, which unfortunately is a lot of the case for other young people with disability. And it means we don't get a lot of job security, which sucks. I think for me, at least having that knowledge that I will have an end date is it's not necessarily comforting, but it is nice to at least know that as opposed to prematurely ending a job for any reason. It made me more conscious of money and of being aware that I would face some sort of emotional impact once that date hit. But I would say because of that, it always makes me a little bit uncertain about where my next job will be. It makes me quite worried about once my contract ends, what will happen if I can't get another one? What will my next steps be? There's a lot of emotional upheaval and uncertainty that comes with the knowledge that your job will end for sure at a point in time. I think what also makes me feel quite terrible about my past experiences at times is the fact that with a lot of contracts ending, sometimes there is the opportunity to extend your contract or to seek further employment with that organization that you're with. And I've personally, in my past, moved on from jobs in those organizations because I felt either uncomfortable with like the environment that I'm in, or maybe the culture didn't fit me that well. Maybe there's like an element of not feeling safe, especially as a young person with a disability. I would leave jobs because of that, and I wouldn't seek further employment with some organizations because of that reason. But I think, alongside that, because of that, there is sometimes the element of guilt that I could have been looking for further employment within those companies, and I chose not to because of those reasons. But, how many opportunities am I going to get? Why did I not take advantage of the fact that I did have the opportunity to perhaps extend my contracts? And it sucks to think that I am thinking and feeling guilty over sacrificing my own safety, my own well-being within an organization just to maybe have that stability and seek out further employment with them because I don't know where else I'll get opportunities.
The hardest, I reckon, having to face down how much do I want financial security, but how much do I actually value my safety and my emotional health?
I think so, especially, when you are a person with a disability that doesn't get a lot of opportunities sent your way, it feels bad moving on from a chance at further employment when it's right in front of you, right? For any other reason.
Yeah, even if it's actually putting yourself at risk. But because we don't have those opportunities to have that safe environment, we have to toss up the pros and cons, which is ridiculous. Dureece, we've talked about it previously. You've had a lot more experience than Tan and I in this. So what are some of your own experiences in this, and how have you recognized when you've actually had to quit?
Yeah, I think a lot of that comes with age. I'm a little bit older than you guys. I'm 26.
Cringe.
Yes, aging,
3
pain.
years, my dude. 3 years.
Um, but I've had quite a lot of jobs. Most of them haven't been great, and transitioning out of them, it's there's an interesting duality in it, in that like every time I've had to leave a job that I just couldn't stand, or I've been fired or whatever, it's like, oh no, going back into financial instability. But at the same time, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so glad to be out of there. Every time I've left a job, I'm the opposite to Tan. I've only had one job where I left because of a contract expiring, which is
Oh,
my current
what
job.
job?
Yeah, well, yes, but every other job I've left has been because like I just couldn't take it anymore, or like I got fired. Every time I've left a job, it's been because like it was an abusive environment from like customers, staff, managers, or all three. The point where it was like, okay, enough is enough is when, for example, when I worked, it was just like, it was just beyond abusive, like from all sides. It was insane.
No.
Not that extremely reputable. I'm gonna censor out the name, of the organization just in case. So if anyone's listening to this, it was a particular fast food organization. Um, I will have bleeped that out. I worked for a particular fast food organization, and it was just horrible. So I left, and every other job I've had that I quit, I don't know if this is irresponsible, but I've had jobs where I just straight up walked out. Like I broke on the spot. Like I worked for a very large retail chain that will go unnamed, and it was so bad. I just sort of like stared at the ceiling for a moment. And I was like, this is ridiculous. And I just walked out. That was a job where I didn't get given any training, really. They kind of just said, get to work. And I was like, what? How do I use like the cash register? How do I do this? Like,
So that was
and
already a red flag for you that they didn't give you any type of training, any type of preparation.
Or
yeah, I
set you
was
up
like,
for any accommodations.
I was like 16, 17.
Little
Um,
baby.
it was so bad that like I didn't even think about asking for accommodations at that point. I was just like, I haven't even been given training.
Yeah.
And whenever I was, and this, so I live with an acquired disability. I live with a dissociative disorder. Just quick recap, that could be anything from heavily zoning out to blacking out on the spot. And it makes, focusing hard, as you can imagine. When I worked at this supermarket chain, if I was falling behind even like a couple of seconds, they'd just be like, they'd be like really abusive. It wouldn't be like, hey, you need to speed up. It's like, like the people just start screaming, like, what are you doing? You're so far behind. God, it was like I was in the military or something.
Did you
Um,
have a breaking point? Like a
um,
moment, how did you know that it was obviously you went through it like for such a long amount of time in each job. Was there a point when was the point where you decided, okay, that's the last straw, I'm out of here? What would you say to look out for just to say, no, this is it?
well, here's the funny thing. I think I had multiple breaking points at each job, and then I went to go resign, and then I was like, oh wait, I need money.
Mm.
I'm gonna be homeless
Oh,
if I
that
do this now.
sucks, dude. Ah,
Um, like there was a time where I had a big surgery coming up, and I was like, if I quit now, I won't be able to like cover my payment plan that I've got set up for it. So there was a lot of issues like that where I already had the breaking point, but then I had to turn back. It's crazy. A lot of these companies that I've worked for that were really abusive, you would have thought if I was that useless, why didn't they just fire me? And like some did. Some would fire me, and some would like soft fire me by like just reducing my hours to 3 and then 0 per week, and then I'd quit on my own because I wasn't making money. But some of them were really abusive and they just kept me there. And it sort of made me wonder, I didn't feel like I was that slow all of the time. Like sometimes, yeah, when my dissociation was really kicking in hard, I would fall behind a lot. But even when it wasn't,
I guess it just sucks to know that you're just viewed as like another pair of hands. But I think it's so important to recognize. I mean, Doris, you've just explained it so well that it's so difficult to get a job, especially not only as a young person, but as a young person with a disability, and to maintain any type of financial security or stability to any level, that even when you have reached a breaking point, it's awful that you have to review the fact that, okay, is it worth me staying though? Just so I can have stability? Is it worth me dealing with all of these things, all of these red flags, all of the abuse that I'm dealing with? Um, it's awful, and it's such an important thing to recognize.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's in these periods where I was working for a really, really bad job. Pretty much my whole week was just contemplating, okay, do I go broke or do I keep trying to do this job? Because I knew that my disability wasn't going anywhere. Like it's not like a switch I can just flip off. So it's like I'm going to keep dealing with this. Do I really want to do that? And I think it was in late 2019 when I was 21 that I was just like I simply cannot deal with this anymore and I quit the job I had at the time, and I was just like, whatever happens, happens. And like it actually got to a point where the jobs I were in were so bad, I was like, I would rather just like couch surf and sleep in hostels, or like if necessary, just sleep on the street. I was like, the toxic work environments are getting to me that much.
I think it's such an awful thing that you had to sacrifice your basic rights just so you could have well-being and safety and not put yourself at risk in the workplace. That
Yeah.
shouldn't be a thing that happens.
But
And I
then
understand like
then you put
from a like a commercially pragmatic point of view, I understand that with my condition, I could be very slow at times. I'd often blank out for large periods of time. And it's like, I get that maybe that's not what they wanted for like, or what they needed for like the speed of workflow they needed. That's not an excuse for the way they were treating me. Like someone could have pulled me
Exactly.
aside and said, hey, do you need extra support? Or like, hey, is this job for you? Hey, is there another position we could put you in?
Yeah, it sounds like you've had a really rough time, but at least you left. It sounds awful, but at least ultimately, I think for me, having that level of self-respect to realize I should not have to deal with this, and then honestly having some sort of plan as to how you're about to leave before you do kind of helps. That was for me what happened with my all of my contracts was that I knew my time was ending. I felt awful about it, but then I was also like, okay, that means I should be more conscious with my money. That means I need to have my resume constantly updated to deal with that. That means I need to be conscious of the fact that I'm going to not have the best time emotionally right after I leave. But that's how I dealt with that within moving on from my past experiences, especially, and that's what I'd pass on to anyone else is to at least have some sort of plan, even if it is, weighing up the pros and cons before you start planning as to whether or not it's worth quitting, because as Doris has clearly demonstrated, there's a lot of systemic issues around that. But having some sort of plan about what your next step is so that you're not completely lost within the void right after, that does go a long way. But do you also want to discuss your own experiences?
I don't really have that many experiences. My only real job opportunities have been a bit like Utah, contract work or non-profit organizations before my current position now and that of with CYDA. Everything else has been volunteer. I did a lot of volunteer work all through my teenagehood and early adult to hope to gain any type of employment and work my way up the chain, as they say, with me either becoming so emotionally fatigued from doing that work that I just had to quit, or it just becoming obvious that I was not actually going to go anywhere.
Do you have
So
any advice on, even within your volunteer experience, on how to recognize, especially with emotional fatigue or disability related reasons, when it's time for you to not continue with the workplace that you're at?
I'm not sure because I don't think I even really recognized it in myself back then. It was more just I woke up one morning and I really didn't want to go.
Real.
Um,
That's so real though.
and that feeling, even though I pushed myself, it just kept happening.
Mm.
So I was like, yeah, okay, something's going on here.
At that point, you gotta reassess, right?
Yeah, why am I not enjoying this anymore? Why does this feel like a chore now? What's going on? What's changed? Because I was really excited about this when I started. And either it was months of work not being acknowledged, or it was that feeling in my pit of my stomach like, am I actually going to get any paid employment from this? Am I
Mm.
just continuously upskilling?
Yeah. That's
Oh gosh, the continuous upskilling is crazy, by the way.
Yeah,
That we have to constantly be told, like, if you upskill more, you'll get more opportunities. Like sometimes that just doesn't happen, though.
yeah,
Sometimes you just want more security than like I'm just gonna keep trying to get more skills.
Especially when you have to pay for the upskilling. I'll pay for this certificate and this like 3 day training thing, and it's like I'm losing money now.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
isn't good.
I'm losing money to have the possibility, this nebulous possibility of gaining money that
Yeah,
might
no,
not
it's
even
stupid.
eventuate.
So thankfully, I didn't pay for anything, but I was
That's
offered
good.
Yeah.
training opportunities.
I mean, still,
Um,
it is still time and energy being spent too, which is
Yeah, it's an
important.
investment of your
exactly.
time. Exactly.
And half the time I just felt like I also felt as though it was a pity handout. There was only really one volunteer position that I really loved that I really didn't want to end, where I felt actually treated like an adult.
I think trusting your gut, like I think all three of us have recognized when we don't want to be there. And I
Yeah,
think to see even subconsciously, even your gut, trust your gut. And if that reason exists for you, or if you have that slight inkling that maybe this isn't right, you don't have to act on it straight away. You don't have to be impulsive and go straight in head first, like, yo, I'm out of here forever and ever and ever. But take a moment to just reassess and weigh up the pros and cons, weigh up what would happen if you left. Think about maybe what sacrifices you would have to make in order to leave, if any, versus what advantage would come from you leaving. And don't discount the fact that your well-being would be better off if it is that situation.
even if
That
it's
is
just
important.
your emotional and mental.
Exactly. I think, having a sit down once you recognize that you're having those feelings and going through those questions and asking yourself all of those things, that will help you have a better understanding of when it's time for you to start making plans to transition out.
Just acknowledge your feelings. So, next question. We'll head straight into it then. What are the emotional repercussions of moving on from a job? How do you regain that sense of purpose?
Um,
Bruce, do you want to start that off?
yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I've talked about like the financial impacts of like, because I wasn't living with my parents. Of like, oh shit, like I've got no money, I've got to take care of this myself, and that brings with it its own emotional repercussions of like, how do I survive? And that sort of like if you think of Maslow's hierarchy, it's like my number one priority on the list is not being met. Like you go into a serious panic. How I dealt with that, there's not really a way to deal with it so much as like reduce it. Like you can't get rid of the feeling. You can't get rid of that fearful, feeling of, oh, how am I going to eat? Like where am I going to sleep? You can't just get rid of that entirely. But I just distracted myself basically. I don't know. I'm not like recommending this as a strategy. It's just what I did. I'd go get free Wi-Fi somewhere and like watch movies on my phone or laptop. Um, I'd go to galleries like because I really like that we've got lots of free galleries in Australia. I've heard that like a lot of them you have to pay to get in other countries. So I just walk through galleries and stuff like that. I go for nature walks and things like that. And again, I'm not saying that you should have to do this.
No,
I'm
I
just
think it's
saying,
good though. I think like sometimes just taking some time and just like doing normal, just like
yeah.
whatever is
Well,
sometimes
because
what you need to recharge anyway.
yeah, well, I mean, because what I was doing for a long time was just sitting around looking up, oh, what's some kind of like I'd look for jobs constantly online, knowing I just left a job, but I'd look for something else, and I'd try to find something that looked like it might be a little bit more manageable for someone like me with the limitations I did have. And I was just like, hang on, no, this is ridiculous. All I'm doing is sitting down, focusing on the problem. I've got to get a breath of fresh air. Like, if you do have that type of financial stress when you've left a job and all the fear that comes from that, don't just spend every waking hour thinking about that because it is very easy to do because your primary focus is always survival. You kind of have to ignore your instinct for a while and let yourself decompress. And yeah, no, I just go for walks. I go to galleries. I see if I had friends I could hang out with and stuff. And just anything I can to sort of put a space, like a buffer between freaking out about, money and going to bed. Like those can't be the only two things you do, especially if you
Yeah.
left your job because of the impacts it was having on your mental health, don't go straight into another situation where your mental health is still being worsened by the minute and you don't have money. Like you need to put something in there to break it up.
I'd agree with that. I think adding on to that, even alongside taking space to yourself, and I definitely agree with that. Just give yourself time to decompress. I also think for me, what has really helped is refocusing on my side projects and my side hobbies. And if you don't have any, find some. Like it's think about what you would like to try, and if there's any feasible way of you doing that. So, I've picked up singing lessons and done some like brief acting coaching and stuff like that. There's been just random in and out things that I've wanted to do, like content creation or, you know, performing arts or like sports or stuff like that, that not only distract you or give you time and space to yourself, but also gives you a reason to get up, right? Like I have jujitsu now every Wednesday. I have to go to
Oh,
that. Yeah, I'm gonna learn to beat people up. Woo! But having that gives me a landmark in my week. And I know that's gonna help me going forward. And I think having those little landmarks in your week, or those little activities in your week that you can kind of go to and be like, this is my space, this is the thing that I like doing, that also gives you a sense of purpose, a sense of structure when you don't have one because you've moved on from a job. And even then, there's the possibility that maybe it'll evolve into something that could be a job, but that's kind of a play it by ear. But the ultimate
hmm.
focus is that you have that time to yourself, you have that space to do things that are not, you know, where is my money, where is my food, where is my brain?
Um, Another thing I did to sort of maintain my sense of purpose. So for a while, through various means, like, during COVID, the job seeker payment got doubled for a while. And so that sort of took the edge off for like a while. I took out my super at one point, which was terrible that I had to do that. But
Mm.
I took out my super to sort of give me an extra few months. So all those years of working gone. But one thing I did while I was sort of financially stable, but I like for a bit, but I felt like I had no sense of purpose. Because, a really big problem is that society puts so much of your worth on what you do for work. And it's terrible because that's not an indicator of your value as a person. Look at so many conversations when you meet someone for the first time. The first thing you say, other than what's your name, is, "Oh, so what do you do for a living?" Like,
Yeah.
that, dude. I ask stuff like, what do you do for fun? What do you like? What music do you enjoy? Like, I don't care like what you do for money. Like, unless it's a job you really love and you're excited about. I just ask people like what they like because that's more important to me
Your
than
contribution, yeah, I think it's so important to recognize your contribution to society should not and is not measured by how much you are adding to the job market and how much
yeah.
financial security you're grabbing from it.
Because I've met a lot of people who, quote, contribute to the economy and they earn a lot of money and they're
Mm.
horrible people. Like, I'd
Right?
much rather meet someone who doesn't like financially contribute, but they're actually a nice person who makes the world worth living in. But anyway, yeah, in between jobs, I often had no sense of purpose because I was just like, I'm not doing anything. And everyone loves the idea of having a long weekend, but when you have like a long year where
Yeah.
you're not doing anything, you kind of start going crazy. Especially if you like live alone because you're not seeing people and you're not doing anything. I started volunteering. I volunteered for a mental health organization. It was only once a fortnight, but it gave me something to look forward to and it gave me some structure. That was really helpful for me. So I would highly recommend. Oh, I also, when I was a teenager, I volunteered at my local library.
Mm.
That was only once a week. I highly recommend volunteering. Don't basically just do free work. Like, don't do like full-time volunteering where they work you really hard and pay you nothing. Um, do something where it's like it's the amount of work you'd expect from a volunteer. Like where they don't like exhausting you and like give you like free coffee or something. But it's a really good way to sort of keep your wits about you. It really helped me. And funnily enough, the job I got at CYDA, I got through volunteering because in the mental health space, they also talk about a lot of adjacent advocacy roles, whether volunteer or paid, advocating in the queer community, in the disability space. And then I was like, oh, okay. And then I heard about CYDA and I applied. So volunteering can lead to good opportunities. Just make sure you're not volunteering for someone who just like wants
Is
free
taking
work out of you.
advantage of you.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think especially acknowledging the fact that not only as a young person, but as a young person with a disability, it is a lot more difficult for you to get opportunities to work. And there can be a lot of shame and stigma around that. And so it is so important to recognize that what you're putting into the economy is not what is ultimately going to be important and is also not going to be necessarily the most defining characteristic of what fulfills you. And it shouldn't be.
And sorry, I was talking for ages. We'll move on to Britt.
Yeah,
Um,
we should actually hear from Brett. We really should.
All good, guys. A lot like Dureece, I do a lot of stuff where I try and go out to the community and stuff. Take time for myself. Um, but also like I struggled a lot with my mental health as a teenager,
Mm.
mainly because I wanted to work.
So
Uh,
how did you deal with that?
I didn't for a while.
Real.
Um, and then it got to the point where I was really recognizing like, oh my God, this is really hurting me. Um, so that's when I started doing my photography. That's when I started learning new skills. But it got a little bit worse when I was like when I after I turned 18. So I got my dog. Um,
Go.
my dog, she was my sense of purpose. She meant I had to get out of bed every morning because even if I didn't want to get the fuck out of bed, I had to go feed her.
Mm.
Even if
Keeps
I
it
didn't want
alive.
to leave, even if I didn't want to leave the house, I had to go walk her. So then I got into dog behavior and into
That's
dog
so cool.
training.
That's
And
so cool.
I do dog training once a week with a professional dog trainer. Basically, it's filling in those little gaps, like you guys have said, and giving myself a reason to get out of bed in the morning. So obviously, I'm a bit privileged in the fact that I can have an animal. Um, Although it has been really hard to afford sometimes. It's filling in those gaps and finding things that you enjoy and finding those reasons to get out of bed. The dog training once a week, or every Sunday my friends come over and we do a game day of either board games or video games.
Stop, that's so cute.
And my partner's friends come along as well. It's those little things there that
Especially when they're external, I think as well. I mean, like your dog, your friends and stuff. I mean, even if you can't motivate yourself into doing a self-controlled activity, having other people or other animals or other,
to
you
hold you
know, to
accountable
hold you accountable
to
also
do.
really
Yeah.
helps you to like maintain the fact that you have a reason to get up every day.
yeah, like
Yeah.
what I was saying before with my volunteering, like that was once a fortnight. Like that is so infrequent, but it made such a big difference because
Right?
what I would do is I would like after my session, I just have this glow. Like after our fortnightly meeting, I just have this glow that would flow on into the rest of the week. And when that glow started to sort of simmer away, I'd be like, "Oh wow, I can't wait for our next session." Like it would give me something to look forward to. And that builds this sort of warm, positive momentum that gets you through the day. And then you'll end up finding other things to find meaning and purpose in. Like I started getting really interested in decorating around my home. Um, and you might make a friend
Is
through
the aesthetic
volunteering.
king.
Um, other things will pop up. You just need something to reignite the spark, and it'll lead
Yeah.
into something now. And now I feel like I have a really good sense of purpose. It's really great.
Find something that reignites your spark. Because that is going to be the thing that is the most at risk
I want that
after
to be
you
the
move on from a job.
tagline for this episode. Find something to reignite your spark.
Which
It's
is
just it's so nice, and I think definitely moving forward, it's clear that we all learned so much from working in a disability organization, just about basic self-respect and self-advocacy, honestly, and just recognizing what we need and the fact that we shouldn't have to justify our basic needs as well as people with disability. And it's so important to recognize that your disability does not stop you from being as Britt said, a productive employee. But we might end it there, I reckon.
We gotta go.
We gotta go. Stop recording.
This podcast was brought to you by the Dream Network, a program that bridges the gap between disabled job seekers and employers and aims to help disabled youth build the skills and confidence they need to enter the workforce. The Dream Network is a program run by Children and Young People with Disabilities Australia, also known as CYDA.